Welcome back to The Critique, where we help you maximize the impact of your work.
This week, we're diving into a very polemical video transcript.
The core argument is that the Free Palestine movement uses manufactured victimhood narratives, kind of leaning on leftist rhetoric while, ignoring its own internal issues.
A lot to unpack there.
A lot. So let's get right into the first point about the scope of the argument.
Okay.
The primary argument about the Victim Olympics and projection is significantly diluted by extensive, undefended historical claims, pulling focus away from the contemporary localized critique.
Right.
The material makes a really strong case about this idea of contemporary contradiction. The woe is me stance, while at the same time allegedly upholding these systems of injustice.
And that Victim Olympics frame is so sharp. It's very topical. It zeroes right in on a modern medium.
It does.
But the issue is the argument immediately pivots from that really sharp observation into this massive historical thesis.
A huge one.
Yeah, and I wonder if that intense focus on comparative history, the whole discussion of the last 1,400 years of colonization by Islam.
And the challenge to bring up the actual numbers of the Inquisition versus Jihad.
Exactly. Is any of that really necessary for the central point about contemporary projection?
It feels like a massive distraction, a complete tonal shift.
It is, because when you drop a claim about 1,400 years of history into a video like this, you've basically committed yourself to defending, a 10-volume history series.
Follow it, and frankly, they shouldn't have to.
No, they want to understand the inconsistencies happening right now. They're just going to get bogged down in a historical debate that, isn't even central to proving the point you're trying to make.
You're asking the viewer to digest the equivalent of, 3 PhD dissertations on global history in the middle of a focused modern critique.
So what's the fix?
Well, the core persuasive power here lies in the specific, modern inconsistencies, the immediate local stuff.
Okay.
We'd suggest, putting those huge historical and theological comparisons aside for now. Or maybe, at most, just use them as a single high-impact framing sentence.
I agree, but is there a danger that taking out all the history makes the criticism seem a bit ungrounded? You do want to show this isn't a new pattern.
That's a fair point, but you find that sweet spot by relying on the writer's own evidence of injustice within the region itself. The material already details it.
So you ground it locally instead of globally.
Exactly. The powerful core idea is projection. That's what needs proving right now.
So to strengthen that projection argument, we should, immediately foreground the specific visceral contradictions the transcript already mentions?
Yes.
Like that powerful moment where the writer points out that the movement calls Israel an apartheid state while allegedly having a system where Jews or other non-Muslims, quote, could not enter into most of your own neighborhoods?
And even more specific, there's that mention of the small neighborhood of Black Arabs, the so-called slave quarters of 11,000 people.
Right.
These aren't abstract historical debates. They are concrete, localized examples of alleged hypocrisy happening right now.
Those are so much more persuasive to a modern audience than arguing about global colonial history because they directly challenge the victim narrative with the writer's own evidence.
If the thesis is Pallywood, you need the evidence from the local stage. So keep the focus laser sharp on that.
That definitely sharpens the angle.
Okay, but even if we nailed a scope, there's a serious issue with how the core argument unfolds, specifically around that clip analysis of Iran.
The structure?
Freedom movement in Iran is introduced prematurely and fractures the overall critique of the victim narrative.
I see that. The core argument is powerful. This idea that the victim narrative is a scam born when leftism or communism meets jihad.
A really strong ideological fusion concept. That should be the anchor.
It should. But the connection between that general victim Olympics idea and the very specific, very detailed critique of the young woman talking about Iran, it just isn't fully set up before the pivot happens.
It's a structural jolt, right? 1 minute we're talking about a broad pattern, and then bam, suddenly we're deep diving into whether American intervention is never good or if sanctions crippled the Iranian economy.
The listener feels blindsided. It wrenches the argument from a regional critique of projection and shoves it into this huge separate debate on global imperialism rhetoric.
It feels like a tangent, a really detailed, interesting tangent, but a tangent nonetheless.
So, how do we fix that?
We think you need to segment the analysis clearly. Group the entire critique of that clip into its own unified, dedicated section.
So you set up the main thesis first.
Exactly. You establish the core projection thesis, and then you introduce the case study. You could even frame it with something like, Now let's see how this victim narrative is weaponized by Western ideology.
I like that. So you treat the clip as a case study, which immediately improves the structure. You establish the general idea about localized contradiction, and then you say, okay, here is a perfect, detailed example of how that same cognitive dissonance shows up.
And the material has all the elements to create that contrast. The writer analyzes the clip's claim that the Iranian movement is rooted in Islamophobic pro-colonial regime change.
Right, which is a very specific ideological claim.
And you can contrast that directly with the speaker's own evidence about internal regime failure.
You mean like the severe drought in Tehran and the government's inability or negligence to supply water?
That's the most potent rebuttal right there. It completely counteracts the external blame narrative.
And the writer also brings up the history, the desire of the Iranian people to move away from an Islamic republic, something that existed even before 1979.
Right, those internal pressures, the ideological fatigue, the systemic failure to even provide water, that's so much more impactful than just arguing about sanctions in the abstract.
So by placing the clip analysis in its own section, it becomes a powerful, structured case study of cognitive dissonance.
You're demonstrating that the regime and its apologists blame external forces for problems that are, visibly caused by internal incompetence and systemic failure.
And that structural clarity keeps the listener on track. Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
So finally, let's talk about tone, about maximizing persuasive reach.
Okay.
While the material effectively challenges the listener with uncomfortable facts, the use of highly charged, generalizing labels and confrontational rhetoric may undermine the material's persuasive reach beyond an already convinced audience.
That's a crucial point, because what I really like about this piece is its ability to present these stark, real-life counterexamples, especially on women's rights. The anecdotes are devastatingly powerful.
They really are. But then, is there a risk that by focusing on these extremely aggressive labels, like calling the whole thing the free pie scam, or referring to people as wokey woke folk on the left, that you actually detract from the gravity of those facts?
I think it absolutely does. I mean, you take a heartbreaking, powerful anecdote like Mahsa Amini.
Beaten to death by the morality police for not wearing the hijab correctly.
Just horrific. And that moral weight is instantly diluted when it's framed as part of a false dichotomy about skimpy outfits. The reader might just focus on the aggressive language instead of the actual injustice.
These charged generalizations, they're like shortcuts. They work perfectly for an audience that already agrees with you, that's in on the political shorthand.
But for anyone else, anyone skeptical, they just act as a barrier. It lets them dismiss the whole argument based on tone alone.
So the suggestion here is to maintain that confrontational, unapologetic stance on the facts. Don't back down on the evidence, but maybe reduce the reliance on these broad, politically charged labels.
Let the evidence of the severe injustice carry the emotional weight.
Exactly. Your facts are strong enough to stand on their own. They don't need rhetorical crutches. You want your audience thinking about the reality of the Mahsa Amini case, not arguing about a slang term.
So in practice, how do you do that?
You can achieve it just by using the writer's own descriptive analysis more rigorously. When you're discussing ideological frameworks, instead of using generalizations like demonic ideology or shorthand like jihadists.
You use the more precise language that's already in the material.
Yes. The writer already articulated the threat very precisely. They say the ideological position that 10% of the population are extremist fundamentalists who believe in the fullness of the Quran in its original context.
And then they specify that this group believes in going out and, quote, massacring, mass slaughtering peoples who do not submit to their God. I mean, that is extraordinarily potent language.
It's chilling. And by using the specifics of that belief system, the speaker makes the criticism far more rigorous and, I think, persuasive than just using a political label that can be easily dismissed.
Let the specifics of the ideology articulate the criticism.
Exactly.
Okay, that was a deep dive.
It was. But these are critical adjustments that should really maximize this transcript's reach and impact.
This material is definitely robust. It's packed with highly critical insights. So, a brief recap of the main actionable suggestions?
Let's do it. First, focus the material. Put those extensive historical and theological debates into a more confined section, or even a separate piece entirely. Give primacy to the local, contemporary contradictions.
Second, improve the structural flow. Unify the critique of the Western ideological overlap, using that Iran clip as a dedicated, focused case study. Don't let it fracture the main argument.
And finally, just calibrate the rhetorical temperature. Let the factual evidence, like the Mahsa Amini case, and the tangible failures, like the Tehran drought,
Let that deliver the emotional punch. Reduce the reliance on those aggressive, easily dismissed generalizations.
These adjustments will significantly strengthen the focus and broaden the persuasive power of your work.
We genuinely want to help strengthen this material.
Absolutely. Refine the transcript based on these points. And please, feel free to submit your work back in for more feedback once these improvements are made.
Until next time, keep critiquing.